Thank you.
Good afternoon. Please take your seats and let's close the doors.
Emocionante esto, ¿no? No sé. Algo importantísimo. Live mic. Live mic. Hombre, muy bien. Kendall, ¿vamos? ¿Cómo se hace el puntapié inicial? Should we wait for an order or should we start? We're live?
You're live, please.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. Dear Pedro Duque, Spanish Minister of Science, science ministers and equivalent authorities from all over the world, dear friends and hosts here at Google, and also Google Worldwide. And very importantly, thank you everyone joining us from all corners of our planet via live stream. Welcome to a very special event. This is truly a collection of firsts. Our first participation as a Chilean science ministry in the COP, the first gathering of science ministers at COP meetings, and the first live high-level meeting where participants and viewers are truly connected in real time. We're thankful for all the enthusiasm we received from all over the world. There are some obvious technical challenges we will need to tackle in the future in order to guarantee the success of these meetings, but isn't science about challenging ourselves, to have novel ideas, experiment, and work out how to make it happen? Our expectation for today is one of a more inclusive and transparent way of conducting a high-level meeting. In this meeting, we have used innovation in order to bring people together, to tear down walls and welcome everyone. We think that traveling costs should not be an issue to every member of the global community of nations to make the words heard. Also, and very especially considering that we are currently discussing one of the most important challenges ever, climate change, we think technology is an alternative to gather people and bring them together in a very efficient way. And also with a very low carbon budget, carbon footprint. As such, we sincerely hope that this idea we had of bringing together science, authorities, and advocates endures and is replicated in the future, and not only in climate discussions, but also in many other topics. Science as a welcoming to many people and not excluding people. In sum, this virtual, cost-effective, carbon minimal, technologically driven meeting, perfected and evolved, can truly make a difference regarding agile multilateralism. I would like to express my gratitude to the government of Spain for kindly hosting COP25 and for providing the conditions for a collaborative and very productive environment. I also want to thank Google for providing a team of excellent professionals that worked around the clock to make this meeting happen. I would also like to thank the COP26 president, Claire Perry, who will join us in a few minutes. It is a strong statement that our friends in the UK are here with us today. We are convinced that you share our enthusiasm for connecting people around such an important theme as climate action. I'd like to share a vision of the role of science and climate action, but it is only fair to dedicate a few moments to reflect on the delicate situation we are currently facing back home in Chile, which is in several ways related to the social and environmental objectives of COP25. For decades, Chile has been an example of economic development. Per capita income increased more than in any other country in Latin America since 1990. Poverty diminished from 31% to 6.4% between 2000 and 2017. And inequality was markedly reduced. Today, life expectancy and child mortality equal those of developed countries. Yet, these benefits have not been distributed equitably. The current crisis in Chile, which began October 18th, reflect the discontent produced by inequality, by the higher expectation of a more empowered society. I believe no one in the country was prepared for a social awakening of the magnitude we have experienced, peaceful for the greatest part, but also with unthinkable acts of violence conducted by a few, and with isolated and unfortunate episodes of unacceptable use of excessive force by our security forces. To these extremely difficult times, we have reacted with determination and courage. As government and as the new Ministry of Science, we have rejected all kinds of violence and have declared our total commitment to the protection of human rights and the legal prosecution of all irregularities. In addition, together with nearly all political sectors, we have reached an agreement for peace, an agreement for justice and social agenda, a plan to reinvigorate the economy, and an agreement for a new constitution. These agreements bring us hope because an era of conversation seems to be opening, and because strengthening democracy and strengthening economies with embedded social and environmental concerns are truly 21st century challenges. In this context, it becomes even more urgent to reinforce the need to address climate change, because climate change affects people, communities, and exacerbates regional inequalities. And this brings us back to the topic of science and climate action. In our vision, we set up very specific goals for this meeting. A commitment of all science ministries and equivalent agencies in order to actively participate in future COP meetings, to incorporate sustainable future meetings of science ministry, taking full advantage of available technological solutions, and to receive commitments from all willing participants. Regarding including science ministers in COP meetings, I want to reflect with you what is the role of science in climate change. I can think of several important answers to this question. First, science provides knowledge of our physical world. It is through science that we understand the accumulation of CO2, the increase in temperature, sea level rise, ocean acidification, ice loss, increase in severe and frequent storms, and many others that you understand much better than I do. In recent times, I have also been fortunate to learn and have closely witnessed the IPCC process, which adds an additional dimension to the role of science in climate change, because instances like the IPCC gather and make available this high-quality evidence to everyone. Indeed, the scientific scope of each IPCC report, their thoroughness, collaborative, and systematic methodology to produce up-to-date and compelling evidence constitute a remarkable demonstration of a new type of global organization of the scientific community, a type of organization which, in addition, bases the process on an active interaction with government representatives and policymakers. Together, scientists and policymakers understand and communicate overwhelming scientific evidence in single, agreed reports, which represents a novel and remarkable feature in the relationship between science and society. Finally, the role of science, and more importantly, the role of science agency in climate change, is to translate this evidence to public policy, turn it into climate action. In other words, not only promote the collection of additional evidence, which, by the way, we all know it is always incomplete, but to ensure we use it, to participate in the transit from diagnostics to the design and implementation of solutions. Science matters in public policy, and your involvement matters to make it happen. I've already mentioned the second goal in my introduction. Let's have a more inclusive, transparent, cost-efficient, carbon minimal meeting. Let's be more innovative regarding the way we conduct our multilateral discussions. And allow me to say, we're working to produce in the next few weeks a brief report on the carbon savings that this meeting produced when compared to traditional presential gatherings. We hope to share the results with you soon. And finally, I would like to comment about our commitment for this COP to actively participate in the construction of our national determined contributions through consultations with the scientific community. When Chile first started its journey to become the COP host, we invited the local scientific community to produce specialized scientific reports on several topics. It has been hard work, but our scientists responded with generosity. Maisa Rojas from the University of Chile was in charge of coordinating the effort of more than 600 scientists. Today, at the Chilean Pavilion in Madrid, we received the report from our scientific committees, a report that contains local studies on climate change and practical recommendations that will surely shed much needed light on our policymaking regarding climate action. We invite you now to share with us your thoughts and plans about science and climate change. I first would like to give the floor to my good friend, Minister Duque, and after him, we will receive the interventions from all our colleagues which are connected to this meeting at the moment from all over the world. I want to remind you that there will be no introduction, so when your time comes, please introduce yourself and start speaking, and also a reminder to be very strict with the time because we have to have space for everyone to speak. So let's see how we do, and Minister, thank you very much and welcome to this very first meeting of scientists in COP25. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Minister Ku, for this very interesting initiative, and thanks to all the participants too. Speaking about Spain, we strongly support the continuation of meetings such as this one between science ministries, as well as the harnessing of technological solutions such as this video conference to make them possible and to make them more, say, sustainable. In Spain, the portfolio of my ministry is science, but also is innovation and universities. And we have been actively working on international, European and national strategic initiatives to support research and innovation in climate change, clean energy research and innovation. Moreover, all government plans of the government of Spain are based on the 2030 Sustainable Development Goal agenda, and therefore also our priorities of action, policy matters, and scientific and technical research are currently based on those 17 goals. In our ministry, we are determined to support the creation of knowledge and innovation in order to protect the planet from degradation, facilitate sustainable consumption and production, and take urgent action on climate change so that it can support the needs of the present and future generations. In line with the Paris Agreement and the European Union Programme for Research and Innovation, Horizon Europe, our priority is to reach the goal of 35% of our funding contributing to climate objectives and climate actions. It is important to know that the follow-up on and implementation of national, European, and international research R&I struggle efforts when it comes to monitoring the impacts and making global comparisons. Our proposal will be to use in this group the 2030 Agenda indicators to monitor our efforts in science, technology development, and in responding to these development goals. We would need to agree on creating a technical group to monitor these indicators. This group would be made up of high-level scientists and ministerial representatives who would help to integrate public policies and their tools in the proposal. We believe it is also important to improve the transfer of scientific research discoveries and amplify the voice of scientists in the rest of society. This would require creating a portfolio of content, showcasing scientific evidence and robustly supported data and inferences for society, primary and secondary schools, media, and press and policy offers. We are willing to propose the use of European means to create such content. About organizing research, we believe it is very important to boost the cooperation between North and South, also in the scientific areas. We would propose then within the European Union also synergies between the various development funds and the science funds so that we can boost this kind of cooperation between North and South with scientists. In order to boost innovation, we believe that it is important that our governments make sharp increases in innovative public procurement so that all scientific discoveries are as quickly as possibly turned into innovations that make a difference. And also in that same line, we will create new technology transfer funds that will be with priority used in creating technologies for development of climate change mitigating technologies. Spain supports the multilateral efforts of Europe in studying and mitigating the effects of climate change. And now
continue with the. Thank you very much. So we should continue with Sweden.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Thank you very much for the invitation to this online meeting. I'm delighted to participate and very pleased to meet you all. I've actually been to quite many of the COP meetings from 2010 in Cancun up till 2016, I think, in Marrakesh, and including the Paris meeting where I was a part of the Swedish delegation. But this is the first time that I actually can attend in this way, and I truly appreciate it. So thank you very much for the invitation. I would say a little bit something out of the Swedish perspective. We have in Sweden, we have set out a quite ambitious goal in Sweden. We want to be the world's first fossil-free welfare state. And you can't be that without a good cooperation within our country, but also with other countries. And you can't reach that kind of goal if you don't use science and scientific research-based knowledge, of course. We are a quite small country, but we are trying to be a leading research nation within our means, and putting, if you compare it in relation to GDP, we actually put the biggest amount of money into research and innovation within the EU countries. And we will try in Sweden to defend this position, of course. The greatest, we want to form we have a research policy, but we also want to form a research policy that, of course, that where we safeguard free research. But at the same time, we need to have our research policies to address our societal challenges. And of course, fighting climate change is one of the biggest challenges of our time. And if we want to manage climate change, and a change that does not limit the lives of all of us, we need new research-based knowledge, we need new behaviors, new innovation, and new technology, of course. And if we can manage this together, this will, of course, form a new economic growth, and also within new green sectors. And I'm now preparing a new research bill in Sweden that I will put forward to the Parliament in the autumn in 2020. And the Agenda 2030 goals will be a base of this new research policy, of course. I would say a little bit something on what also the Spanish minister touched upon. In this time, I think it's particularly important to rely on research, not only to solve sort of fighting climate change and other societal challenges, but also when we live in a world where fact resistance and alternative facts and contradictory messages flourish. Here we need teachers, but also researchers. They have an important task to communicate scientific facts and being active in the public debate.
30 seconds.
And we also need more knowledge and more research-based and research resistance. So it is of great importance that that researchers participate in the general debate, and in the case of climate change, in the debate on climate issues, and that we try to to bring about these kind of discussion in open way as possible with open researchers and open scientists. Finally, I cannot refrain from making a reference to Greta Thunberg. She is a young Swedish woman who has...
Sorry, ma'am, the time is up and Jamaica is next.
Yes, that we need to, if we don't listen to the youth, we have to listen to the researchers. So I'm happy to contribute to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so please, the next country, please.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. France, would you please unmute?
Jamaica fell off.
Good afternoon, everybody. Did you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, so thank you very much for the invitation. The portfolio of my ministry is higher education, research, and innovation, and I'm really very pleased to meet you this afternoon. As you all know, energetic and ecological transitions are top priorities for France to reduce impacts on climate and biodiversity and to preserve environment qualities and services. However, we are convinced that we should find new ways for both economic viability and social transformation that left no one behind. For example, plastic pollution in our soils, streams, and oceans was discussed recently at the G7 workshop that points out the need not only to develop technologies for substitutes, but also transformation of our societies, including behavioral changes of decision makers and individuals. That's why in France, we decide to consult our citizens and to ask them to propose concrete actions to fight climate change and to support sustainable development. All these call for progresses within research, innovation, and education. And here, more specifically, I would raise 3 points related to climate. First, reduction of greenhouse gas emissions is a top priority to stabilize climate change well below 2 degrees Celsius. However, it needs not only specific technologies, investments, and policies, but also the embedding of climate issues in other socio-economic constraints. In particular, the required energetic and ecological transition should be coherent with sustainable development goals that left no one behind. For this, we are proposing that science contributes to SDGs, including climate issues, to evaluate, enlighten, and experiment policies for inclusive and viable growth, in particular for most vulnerable populations and territories. Second, as climate extremes are yet here and increase due to climate change, it is becoming urgent not only to better characterize the evolution of risks, but also to develop efficient solutions for resilience and adaptation, in particular for most vulnerable populations and territories. For this, we had proposed a European mission on adaptation to climate change, including societal transformation, where adaptation measures should integrate social constraints as well as economic viability and climate sustainability to avoid lock-in development that will prevent our future capacities. On this field, we are proposing also to increase our cooperation with African research partners with current bilateral and multilateral activities, including other partners. My third point will concern what we call knowledge triangle. Education from primary school to continuous education is required to transform our societies to more sustainable and inclusive growth. In particular, a wise use of new technologies, how we are doing, ranging from new ICT and robotics to advanced biotechnologies and AI is needed to benefit not few, but all. Within this context, the development of high-level network of universities of over 5 continents is a key to prepare new generations on future jobs that use responsible research and innovation for climate stabilization, as well as to reach SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Panama, please unmute.
Good afternoon. I hope you're hearing me well. To follow up on the colleagues from the previous speakers, Panama also has a national strategy for climate change 2050, which was created together with our Ministry of Environment. And we have established then the NDCs, the national NDCs, and the monitoring and evaluation mechanisms to make sure we are fulfilling the goals that we had set up as a country. But obviously, the strategy calls for renewed research and the understanding of the impacts and the consequences of climate change to our country and the region, actually. So as the National Science and Technology Office, and we also are in charge of innovation, we have created tools and strategies to promote more of the knowledge of what the impacts are in our country and in the region. So we have created tools as research mission-based grants, in which related to water and energy specifically, and also in health, because we understand that climate change also will impact in the tropical regions health in very interesting ways, to try to begin to understand and to solve these challenges we have ahead of us. And all these tools allow for international cooperation. So we welcome the idea of working together with countries in the region and in the world to tackle together and to provide perhaps information about the specificity in our region of this climate change impact. We also have open grants on innovation to see how the creativity and the knowledge of our people can help us find solutions and strategies that will lessen the impact of climate change here in Panama. So we'd like to thank Minister Kuf for the invitation and tell them that we in Panama, we are open to participate in any initiative that COP may propose in the future to tackle these problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your words. We move to the next country, please.
Lithuania, please unmute.
We do. So I'm Vice Minister of Education, Science and Sport of Lithuania, and I'm thankful for the initiative of Chile and other countries to organize this meeting, virtual meeting, but nevertheless, Lithuania being a responsible EU member will comply with its obligations on EU Sustainable Development Goals and Paris Agreement on climate change. The ministry, as the main institution responsible for the research policy formation in Lithuania, will carry on its obligations resulting of the respective agreements. I have to mention, of course, that Lithuanian representative Virginijus Sinkevičius has been appointed as the Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries, so that's an obligation for our country also. So challenges related to climate change at the same time are also an opportunity to our research community to share their knowledge and contribute more to finding relevant solutions. Often these solutions are of complex and innovative nature and require an immediate involvement of the research sector. The effective inclusion of researchers is conditional by close cooperation with the industry, governmental sector, and also the NGOs. We believe also that research should become an integral part of the sectorial policies and be more involved into decision-making, especially in the areas having a direct impact of climate change, energy, transport, agriculture, waste management, industry, and etc. Lithuania has a strong research potential in the solar energy field, biotechnology sector, biofuels production, other areas important to the context of climate change environment. Our higher education institutions prepare high-level specialists for and from the study programs, especially in engineering technologies, considering issues related to environment, energy saving, recycling, and waste management. Our government is close to completion of the National Action Plan in energy and climate sector, 2021-2030. This plan contains 5 interrelated policy dimensions, and research innovation is among them. Other elements: decrease of dependence on fossil fuels, efficiency of energy consumption, energy internal market, energy security. And I also have to mention that one of the research financing institutions, the Research Council of Lithuania, starting from 2010, continuing to 2014, they financed a 4-year national research program on climate change and human impact. So we will continue our strong support to the issue. Thank you.
This is next. Please unmute.
Hello from Athens. Yes, I want to also congratulate and thank everybody for this virtual meeting. I think it's a very good development. First of all, we have to understand and insist that the climate crisis should be on the top of the international agenda, as it has important social, political, and economic consequences for all of us. The European Union has been leading the way to climate change in the last years, and we had an interesting discussion in the Council of Ministers a month ago on how science can actually find viable solutions for climate change. And we have also agreed that 35% of the Horizon program should go to climate change. Greece also is bound by the 2030 EU agenda for the sustainable development goals, but at the same time we have nationally a very ambitious national plan for energy and climate, which includes the decarbonizing of the economy, and the Prime Minister recently announced the shutting down of carbon electrical production companies, and we are a carbon producing country by 2028. And our goal is by until 2028, almost 60% of our power to be reduced by renewable sources of energy. And at the same time, we're making an effort to shift the car fleet to more eco-friendly solutions. We have also invested heavily on how to deal with climate change, bringing our researchers, our universities, and our scientists to get together in a national network. But we also believe that national efforts are not sufficient on their own. So it's necessary to see how we can share scientific knowledge and empirical results internationally, how we can create a global network of scientists all around the world. And of course, it is necessary to agree on specific binding national and global goals and make sure that these are met. Finally, to sum up, yes, education is extremely important, and I agree with the statements made before that it's necessary to start education from primary education from younger ages in order to make sure that all of society has a clear view about the important implications that climate change will have to our daily life. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your kind words.
Uruguay is next. Uruguay, please unmute. Eduardo, please unmute.
Okay, sorry about that. Do you hear me?
Welcome. From Uruguay.
Okay, I think Uruguay, the floor is yours.
Israel.
Okay, so we need Uruguay to be on.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much for all. We are very attentive to the participation in this reunion, and I have problem with my phone. Yes, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy for this meeting, and now we are very attentive to the conclusion that you define in this situation. Thank you very much, and I hear you. Thank you.
Indonesia is next. Indonesia, please unmute. Poland is next. Poland, please unmute.
Yes, good afternoon. This is Grażyna Żebrowska speaking, Director of the Department for International Cooperation at the Ministry of Science and Higher Education in Poland. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting us to this meeting. It's a very important topic, and I'm happy that I can be with you. So scientists all over the world deal with research areas and disciplines that can help us respond to one of the greatest challenges of our times, managing the planet Earth in a way that will make it possible to sustain life in its variety, including us humans. This challenge is also on the agenda of the Ministry of Science and Higher Education in Poland and their executive agencies, the National Center for Research and Development, the National Center for Science, and the National Agency for Academic Exchange. There is no single recipe for climate neutrality for every country. Various natural, social, and economic conditions, each state will have to look for a path that will be optimal for itself. Our processes aimed at achieving climate neutrality should be conducted in a way that is safe to citizens, their countries, and economies. Our important research programs, there are innovation against smog, a new program supporting low carbon technologies. Next is emission-free public transport. Poland is implementing ambitious plan to develop electromobility. By the year 2028, about 30% of local bus fleets will be electric buses. We work also on a safe hydrogen storage program and one Silesia under the blue sky. Silesia, maybe you remember from COP24, Katowice. This is a very important region for us. So we would like to have a more clean air in this region also. We all fear a scenario in which our efforts may turn out to be insufficient. Therefore, the role, contribution, and responsibility of scientists and research funding institutions all over the world is enormous and is so much value. I wish my colleagues in Madrid a great and fruitful conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your words.
Peru is next. Peru, please unmute.
Did you say Israel?
Germany is next. Germany, please unmute.
Yes. Hello, can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello? Yes.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this innovative, important milestone in international climate science diplomacy. This is a great meeting, and I'm very happy to participate. On behalf of my minister, Anja Karliczek, I would like to thank you for this, and I'm Director General for International Cooperation, and I'm happy to share with you some of the German actions we did lately and look into the future. With the Climate Protection Plan of 2016, Germany has set targets for the full decarbonization of the economy and society with clear guidances and goals up to the year 2050. And only 3 weeks ago, we passed a climate protection law with binding goals for 2030. And the action plan accompanying this protection law shows clearly that we need an innovation boost at all levels, and we need the latest independent scientific findings in order to assess the true impact and effectiveness of our climate action. Constant checks, evaluations, and adjustments are required. And this is why the German long-term climate strategy makes a strong commitment to research and innovation into a low-carbon society. We will invest into social and technological innovations in important areas such as renewable energy, industrial processes, urban mobility and transport, agriculture, and last but not least, financial markets. And we will analyze whether our policies do enable socially acceptable structural change towards a competitive but climate-friendly economy as a basis for the update of our action plans. We need society to be a part of this whole policy, and that's why we think that social sciences are important as well. We also invest a lot into international research and cooperation, and we hold the strong political conviction that we need multilateral solutions to generate and exchange our climate knowledge, both in our regions and worldwide. And I will give 2 examples. Together with 16 countries from Western and Southern Africa, we have established 2 regional climate service centers, and this provides up-to-date regional research, capacity development, and climate services to tackle the challenges in these regions, but also Germany benefits a lot of these experiences. And a few weeks ago, the German icebreaker Polarstern sailed into the Arctic, and this is the largest polar expedition in history, and perhaps some of your colleagues take part in this. Researchers from 20 countries accompany this expedition, and we are really looking forward to the results for a better understanding of key aspects of global climate change. In this sense, the Federal Ministry of Education and Research strongly appreciates the request of you, Chair, of a more intensive involvement of science ministers into the COP processes. As science ministries, we have to guarantee that the voice of science is heard as part of the political decisions made at future COP meetings. And therefore, we propose to examine if today's virtual meeting might be an appropriate contribution for future COPs, and if we shall seek for better formats on other occasions. Thank you very much, and greetings to Chile.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Peru is next. Peru, please unmute.
Yeah, yeah, great.
Dear ministers, it is a great pleasure for me to share my appreciation as a president of the National Council for Science and Technology and Innovation of Peru. Peru has developed a national strategy for climate change and a national strategy of biology diversity for 2021. Given our geographical location, glaciers are of utmost importance for ensuring the access of our population to clean water for the sake of personal consumption and for sustaining economic activities of our countries. Our country has lost 40% of the area previously covered by glaciers. So this is a great concern for us. Forests in our country cover more than 60% of our territory, and in the forest, our indigenous groups and local population has access to vital resources such as wood and medicinal plants. Given our condition as a coastal nation, climate change creates harmful impacts to our fishery sector and the coastal ecosystems. As a rector of the National System of Science and Technology, we are, of course, committed to finance and promote research in this area, which includes the development of technology and, of course, all the research which is transversal for the different problems which affects climate change. In Peru, our system is composed with different actors, and mainly the Ministry of Environment has the duty, of course, to cope with the different objectives to protect our sustained development, but also to cope with the different problematic situations related to climate change. The Ministry of Environment also has 3 institutes which are concerned with the different situation of climate as a tsunami, or we have other institutes, Geophysical Institute and the Institute for Minery and Natural Resources related to protect the natural resources with mining conditions, and also the Institute for Glaciers and lakes in the high mountains. So our duty as a National Council for Science and Technology is to articulate these institutes, articulate with the Ministry of the Environment of Peru to promote the research in the different objectives which are related to climate change. So in the years following, the 2 following years, which we are committed up to 2021, we are creating instruments which articulate these different institutes related to climate change.
Estonia is next.
Thank you very much, Peru.
Sí, ya están en Estonia, ya. Son 4 minutos.
Pero no fueron 4.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, now is the time to commit ourselves to acting decisively and ambitiously in order to get climate change under control. Climate change is a problem that requires a systemic and a holistic approach based on 3 pillars: education, research and development and innovation, joint commitment and civic engagement. More and more I see young people both willing and eager to play their part in finding solutions to climate issues. We need to support them because they are modeling the future. The only way to make their task easier is to provide young people with a good education. In Estonia, education is honored and we call ourselves Education Nation. For every nation, large or small, can become an education nation. Research and development has a huge responsibility to offer know-how-based solutions to climate change issues, supporting both the development of new technologies for adapting to climate change and the understanding of how the environment adapts or does not adapt to climate change. In our efforts to reach climate neutrality, we need to restructure our energy sector, rethink our transport sector, green our industry, make buildings more efficient, and last but not the least, protect our biodiversity and maintain the integrity of national systems. We see that increasingly more investments are needed in research and development, as achieving climate neutrality requires the whole of our economy and society to adopt the use of green and innovative technologies. The research community needs to better work with the entrepreneurial community, and simultaneously the public sector needs to be aware of the process to remove hurdles and give guidance in terms of priorities. Sharing knowledge and best practices is of key importance here. We have to recognize the vital importance of the startup entrepreneurship, which is an excellent model of merging together the scientific competence, new skills, and needs of society. That brings us to the 3rd pillar, the importance of civic engagement, citizens' initiative, and youth. Estonian origin Community Activity Day, Let's Do It, is a fine example of active civil society that contributes to the climate action. Equally important is to raise awareness of society on climate issues and support people's willingness to draw the government's attention to the matters of climate neutrality, as we know the youth of Europe is the one showing us the example here. Ladies and gentlemen, something that I wish to highlight before the ending my speech: the popularization and communication of science and education. We tend to take a very technocratic approach to our policies, and we see how this can cause a setback. Therefore, communications cannot be the afterthought. It needs to be at the center of creating the right conditions for the technical developments and raising awareness of the society. Thank you for your kind attention.
Ecuador is next. Ireland is next. Cuba is next. Philippines is next.
Good evening. Warmest greetings. It is an honor to participate in this virtual summit under the auspices of the Conference of Parties, and we hereby present our commitments. On behalf of the Republic of the Philippines, I, Fortunato de la Peña, the Secretary of the Department of Science and Technology, conveys the department's strong support and participation in future conferences of the parties, and whenever possible, takes advantage of communication technologies to participate. The department commits to lead the cooperation with the strategic partners to do the following. First is to catalyze the national and local government in generating and diffusing the requisite knowledge to understand future climate scenarios, the risks they entail, and the impacts to various sectors, to the citizens of the Philippines and its global neighbors. In particular, the department commits to continually set higher standards for early warning systems on natural hazards it is directly responsible for, such as those for typhoon, severe wind, storm surge, and other hydrometeorological hazards, and earthquake, tsunami, volcanic eruptions, landslides, and other geological and geophysical hazards. Second, to invigorate the research community towards developing science, technology, and innovation solutions to pressing but solvable disaster and climate challenges faced by the countries most vulnerable to climate change, ensuring a percentage of the national budget is allocated for research on the following: renewable energy sources, protecting freshwater sources, hybrid transportation systems, biodegradable materials and circular economy, smart technologies for agriculture, and resilient buildings and infrastructure. Third, actively promote climate and disaster data governance using the information system developed by our department to harmonize fragmented exposure information and therefore improve vulnerability and risk assessment and disaster prevention, preparedness, and response planning. The fourth is to heartily engage the citizens in the paradigm shift towards climate change adaptation through the department's various formal and informal science education streams, risk communication programs, as well as initiating policy appreciation of disaster and climate risk reduction and management. And lastly, effect in its own backyard, in our own backyard, a massive change in behavior among the workforce and their families to purposefully reduce their carbon footprints and plastic waste, to embrace a more sustainable way of life, and be mindful in its public service that women, children, senior citizens, and persons with special needs can be made more vulnerable to climate change by inattention to their development needs. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention.
Nicaragua is next. Nicaragua, please unmute. Israel is next.
Dear Minister Kov, dear ministers, distinguished guests, I would like to thank you all for the invitation and for establishing this important forum. I find it a timely idea whose time has come. The issue of climate changes is touching upon diverse fields, many of them discussed within the present forum. I believe that we all need to work together as scientists and laymen alike in order to cope with this immense challenge for mankind. The scientific community has started studying this issue about 2 decades ago and has been trying since to comprehend the phenomena associated with climate changes. Along with that came the drive to devise new technologies and novel approaches. Therefore, the current forum do provide many interested parties, Israel included, with appropriate platforms enabling us all to compare our notes. Since the Israeli Minister of Science and Technology, member of the Knesset Ophir Akunis, assumed his position a little over 4 years ago, he put climate changes related issues among the leading scientific topics to be dealt with among the other national scientific priorities. Although the issue of climate changes is a global one and we have to address it together by reducing our global greenhouse gases emissions, we still have to understand that each country will face different impacts and different rates of changes. Israel is a small country in terms of its area with diverse climate regions. Half of Israel is harsh desert, and the rest is where 95% of the population and agriculture is concentrated. Hence, a small shift of the desert line northward by only a few tens of kilometers will lead to devastating impact on the Israeli agriculture and our ability to independently support our needs in food and water. Therefore, Israel considers climate changes a serious near future threat. The Israeli Ministry of Science and Technology is responsible for applicable science, and therefore it promotes both mitigation and adaptation research programs. In mitigation, we find research aiming at producing alternative low CO2 footprint food to meat, development of alternative energy sources, and lowering the CO2 footprint in industrial process. Overall, since 2017, the ministry has commissioned 7 studies in climate changes worth about millions of dollars. Part of the Israeli-German cooperation is also devoted to a program on climate changes totaling about 2 million euros. We have also invested in forest-related research and climate changes. In adaptation, we have scientific programs aimed at improving our ability to better forecast the impact of climate changes on our ecosystem, extreme climate events, water management, impact on agriculture, on health, and so on and so forth. Since many of the challenges and the required technological breakthroughs are global, we strive with other countries, and indeed many of the climate changes researchers are due in the frame of our 30 countries binational collaborations program. I think this is the right stage to ask for new multilateral scientific collaboration in this topic of climate changes. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much for your words.
South Africa is next.
All right, thank you very much for the invitation. Our minister really appreciates this invitation, and we also applaud the initiative for this video conferencing initiative. Our department, or our Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology, is very delighted and supports all of the expressed commitments and principles that have been mentioned, and also want to confirm the collaboration that we have with Germany around the SASCAL program. As South Africa, we believe in a rules-based multilateral system, and hence we are fully committed to the Convention, the Kyoto Protocol, and the Paris Agreement. Accordingly, the Paris Agreement should not be separated from the Convention and its core principles of equity and differentiation of action and support. As a developing country, we expect the developed countries to also provide and show leadership in climate change action, and to provide a means of implementation support to developing countries, to empower the developing countries to also be able to contribute their best efforts to the global cause. Furthermore, given the African continents, that the African continent is already under severe pressure due to recent extreme weather events and that the countries and societies most adversely affected lack the means to address climate change, and the Paris Agreement must be a vehicle for collective global action on adaptation. Enhanced ambitious action cannot be achieved without enhanced support, and in particular, finance, technology, and capacity building. Securing scaled up, adequate, and proper means and resources for developing countries is indispensable to enable developing countries to meet their commitments and implement the Paris Agreement. We therefore reaffirm the important role that science plays, and this must not be questioned. Hence, we must continue to support the work that is undertaken by the IPCC. The revised national determined contributions must take into account what science is telling us, hence the need to consider the IPCC reports in a positive light. We also reiterate that the research that is undertaken should be policy relevant and address current and future challenges, particularly for developing countries. The researchers from developing countries must also play a critical role in this research enterprise, hence the need to increase their participation and also increase their numbers in the research agenda. There must be parity between adaptation and mitigation as per the Paris Agreement, including predictable and sustained financial support for adaptation initiatives. We are encouraged that the technology framework was finalized during COP24. Since early this year, there has been a renewed focus on innovation in South Africa, and we're particularly interested to see how the innovation theme will be implemented. Hence, it is critical that the technology framework is implemented without delay and is provided with the necessary financial support. We call upon for a stronger synergy and coherence of the Poznan strategic program and the CTCN so that their initiatives can be complementary in practice and on the ground, rather than being perceived to be competing and working against each other. Furthermore, there needs to be a way in which the GEF can support the work of the CTCN, both technically, financially, and in kind, so that the CTCN can deliver on its mandate and improve on its support to the developing countries and their NDEs. There is also a need to explore how financial mechanisms can support the CTCN to ensure predictable and sustainable financial mechanisms that can support CTCN to ensure predictable and sustainable funding. Also with a view to extend the support to the NDEs that are hosted by the developing countries, but also to assist developing countries in scaling up technical assistance program and executable technology transfer programs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, South Africa.
Nicaragua is next.
Estimado señor Andrés V. Correa, Ministro de Ciencia, Tecnología, Conocimiento e Innovación de Chile. Estimados participantes, un saludo desde nuestra querida Nicaragua. Agradecemos la oportunidad de ser parte de este proyecto en pro de proteger los recursos naturales y contribuir con los esfuerzos para contrarrestar las amenazas que genera el cambio climático. El Gobierno de Reconciliación y Unidad Nacional que preside el comandante Daniel Ortega Saavedra y la compañera Rosario Murillo tienen el firme compromiso y propósito de seguir participando activamente en todas las reuniones y acciones futuras. Nicaragua ya cuenta con una política nacional de mitigación y adaptación al cambio climático a través del decreto presidencial número 07-2019. Además, Nicaragua posee el Sistema Nacional de Respuesta al Cambio Climático. Desde el Consejo Nicaragüense de Ciencia y Tecnología, CONICIT, se promueve la investigación en energías renovables, la biodiversidad, la capacitación y sensibilización en los diferentes sectores para la protección de nuestros recursos naturales. Además, se difunde el conocimiento en gestión de riesgo y cambio climático en diferentes niveles de la educación en nuestro país. Los retos ante el cambio climático nos obligan a incorporar la innovación en las decisiones asociadas al desarrollo tecnológico. En Nicaragua continuamos con la implementación del Plan Nacional de los Recursos Hídricos, que incluyen acciones para la protección y recuperación de fuentes de agua en las cuencas y en las unidades hidrológicas priorizadas. En Nicaragua continuamos vigilando el cumplimiento de la ley sobre los bosques de mangles, así como propiciamos y facilitamos e impulsamos la reproducción y desarrollo de las plántulas de mangles. En Nicaragua continuaremos con la implementación del Plan Maestro de Reforestación a nivel nacional. En Nicaragua continuaremos incorporando el uso de los biodigestores para el tratamiento de todos aquellos desechos agropecuarios. Esos entre una gran cantidad de compromisos y medidas que tenemos planteados acá en Nicaragua a cumplir en defensa de nuestra madre tierra. Muchas gracias.
We can't hear anything.
No. Indonesia? Ecuador? Ireland? Cuba? Okay, so I think we have no more speakers. If that, Italy, is Italy there? Italy, try to unmute.
I'm typing that to them.
Oh, sorry. Italy, could you send us a signal?
I think we did it. I think we made it work.
Excellent.
I think it's accepted. It worked. Okay. Thank you. I'd like to thank Minister Andrescu for taking this initiative. I think it's important that we get to talk to one another. Even though COP25 doesn't take place in Chile anymore, I think it's important that there is an exchange of views among science ministers, and the emergency of climate change is way too important to be left only to ministries of the environment. It is essential that it becomes a cornerstone of how all ministries operate, especially those that work on research and technology and science. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, something happened. So what are we doing in Italy now? So in Italy, we have introduced a number of pioneering projects into how we conceptualize research and training at the higher education level. We have made sustainable development one of our flagship issues in how we fund universities. And so that this year, the bulk of our specific funding to research projects within the university system will be dedicated to sustainable development, climate change studies, and the overall 2030 agenda of the United Nations. We've also decided to introduce what we call a lecture at zero across as many universities as possible. This means that freshmen, new students will, regardless of the field of the sector of study, they will be required to take a class that has to do with sustainable development and system science. So the main idea is to make sure that regardless of the specific sector of action and training, that each student has an idea of how different topics and different scientific sectors relate to one another and how they impact sustainability science. So we believe this is important in terms of interdisciplinary cooperation, and it's important to make sure that we have a new generation of scientists and graduates that are able to connect the dots between what is done in one field and what kind of impact that has on another field. So this is gonna be introduced next year. It was we started this year, so as of the next academic year, this is gonna be available. It's gonna be available in many universities across the country. Our government has decided to introduce a Green New Deal. So the environment, climate change, and sustainable development above all will cut across a lot of different sectors and disciplines. And I think it's useful to mention this, that based on our recommendations, the Prime Minister has decided that what used to be called the Council for Economic Planning, which is basically the cross-cutting office that oversees the different economic planning across all ministries, has been renamed the Council for Sustainable Development Planning. So now the entire economic policy of the government will need to be assessed not only against GDP projections, but also against sustainability indicators. And last but not least, also in the interest of time, given the fact that I have to leave, in a few minutes I have a new meeting, we have decided to introduce, this goes beyond science and beyond higher education, but I think it's worth underlining this. We have decided to introduce sustainable development as a mandatory topic in all schools, at all levels. And this is going to become, this is already a law and a policy of the government, and will be formally introduced next year in September. So all Italian schools will be required to teach sustainable development education as part of a new module of civic education. And it will be 33 hours a year. It will be mandatory. It will be assessed and will be part of the overall assessment of each and every Italian student. And the main objective is to pioneer a new way of teaching in schools. We suggest that more countries perhaps think about doing something along the same lines and having a new generation of students that understand sustainability as part and parcel of what it means to be a responsible citizen. And we think this is really, it's a strong signal to encourage schools, universities, and the entire research community to take sustainable development, climate change, and economic transformation, because this is basically what in the end, what it requires, the transformation of the economy and society, so seriously that it becomes the cornerstone of a new school curriculum, as well as a new approach to research and science. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Italy. Do we have anyone else connected that has not spoken? We have several on the list, but
Yes, good afternoon. This is the UK here. My name is John Loughead. I'm the Chief Scientific Advisor at the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And I'm here carrying apologies from our Science Minister. You will probably know the UK is shortly, in a few days, holding a general election. And therefore, there are many other imperatives that the Minister has had to attend to. We've heard many excellent statements in this meeting, and Minister Couve, I'd like to congratulate you on your initiative in organising this virtual meeting, which I think is a pointer for all of us in the way that we can take practical steps to address some of the challenges that the world is facing. Understanding those challenges has been driven by science since the very start of initiatives in this area. Some 30 years ago, our then Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, who was herself a scientist, was the first world leader to devote a speech at the United Nations entirely to climate change, and specifically on what the science was telling us. That was reflected by the report in 1990 that led to the creation of the UNFCCC itself, and the reason that we are gathering at this meeting today. Science has continued to guide many of the actions since then. You'll be familiar with the special report on global warming of 1.5 degrees, which triggered in the UK a re-examination of our own goals and resulted, again on the basis of scientific evidence, of a decision to embed in law a requirement that the UK become a net zero emitter by 2050. And much of our work now is focused upon delivering that gain. We are, to a degree, undoing some of the problems caused by our adoption of a carbon-based technology and economy from the first industrial revolution. And I'm sure that the work we're doing on science will lead to providing us with solutions for that in the future. But this is not simply a challenge for individual nations, it's a challenge for the globe. And for that reason, we're very strong supporters of the Mission Innovation Initiative that came out of COP21, which brings together 24 countries and the European Commission, and is showing how we can leverage our respective skills in addressing this significant global challenge. I'm aware of the time pressures, so having made that statement and looking forward to the plans that will result after the election, thank you again for organising this meeting. We look forward to a successful outcome of COP25 and thank Chile for all their efforts in organisation in what must have been difficult circumstances.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that has not spoken from our list? We still have not heard from Jamaica, Indonesia, Ecuador, Ireland, and Cuba. Is any of you here? No? No? Okay. So to continue and to start closing this meeting, I'll give the floor to Claire Perry, MP of the UK and future COP26 President. Claire, the floor is yours.
We use the microphone.
Yes.
So thank you so much. Hello, John. And can I just also join in congratulations on what I think is a really wonderful initiative. I was busy trying to calculate the CO2 saving in my head as we were doing this, but it's really excellent as an initiative to link up these very impressive scientific endeavours and also to use our resources a little more efficiently. John, I think, is John Loughead, who was when I'm no longer the minister, so I'm sorry, I'm not a minister, I'm now the COP president. I rejected the Prime Minister's offer of remaining as a minister because I want to focus 100% on the COP presidency and what I think will be an absolutely crucial year going into 2020, and also to take forward the amazing work of our Chilean friends who have been a superb president. And also, I think this, I know this was not planned, but I think bringing Madrid in as well, bringing Spain in is helpful in some ways. So we're working well together. But for me, that there are two main things we have to focus on. One is that as the minister that brought in the net zero legislation in the UK, we passed net zero legislation by 2050 just this summer. The scientific evidence gave us a landing zone for policy choices that was incredibly helpful. We now have such a body of work from the IPCC and also from our own Committee on Climate Change that mean when we are having those debates about where do we want to get to, we can be much more precise about Paris compliance, science-based targets. And I have to say, as a policymaker, having a net zero by 2050 landing zone, it is enormously helpful for a government, for an organization. So the science has done an excellent job supporting us on that. And I think also that the thing I hear from, we haven't talked about the citizens, the protesting citizens, or maybe did before I got here. What do they say? They say, follow the science. And I tell them that I am. And indeed, nowhere in the IPCC report does it say that we're all going to be extinct within 10 years. But they make a very valid point, which is we now have this incontrovertible scientific base that can guide policy making, and we must not ignore that. And actually, as John said, we can look to that for solutions. And the fascinating conversation is when you talk to scientists, there isn't this sense of despair. There is a sense of, this is a problem we can solve. We now understand the scale of the problem. We may not know all of the tipping points, but we can start to scope out what this might look like. But here are some of the solutions, the technological solutions that we might need to collaborate on in order to solve the problem. And John referenced mission innovation, which we think has got huge potential. So just as the incoming COP president, should it be agreed at the end of this process, Minister Kive, we still have that technical tick in the box to make. And of course, we'll be working very closely with Chile and others in the year ahead. We would very much like to continue this initiative and potentially to amplify it and to make the collaboration of the scientists, both at the government level, the ministerial level, but also in our superb scientific institutions globally. I think there is incredible research happening, not just in the mitigation space, but also in the adaptation space in areas like ag tech, for example. And we're thinking very hard about how we provide a very large and compelling platform for that science so that we can indeed show that we are following the science, but we can also work on ways to collaborate more effectively. So thank you very much for starting this initiative. It's absolutely something we would like to continue. And it is, as a geographer, as my husband says, that's not a real science. He's a physicist. I tell him, as a fellow of the Royal Geographic Society, absolutely it is a science. We also need, to my Italian colleagues' point, Italy being our partner in the COP presentation, I think this idea of energizing a next generation of climate scientists, both for continued monitoring of the problem, but also for the solutions, is absolutely vital. And we love that initiative, and we're thinking hard about what we might do in the UK on that basis. And again, working out how we might join up some of our young scientists and our young people to be focused on that space would be something I'd be really keen perhaps to discuss with this group at an intermediate point next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Claire. I will try to very briefly summarize some ideas that I wrote down. They're not systematic. I just wrote down what seemed to be coming up in many of the interventions. And the first, I think, it's very important to thank Claire for your support in continuing the initiative. It was a first experiment, difficult experiment technically, and as we anticipated, we had some difficulties, but I think it's difficulties that we can work on. I wrote down several things that I think might be useful to summarize. First, of course, the need to have more research, to focus on the research, both in the funding for climate science, both in mitigation, adaptation, with a view of solutions. I agree that from the scientific community, I think what I see mostly is an opportunities perspective and not a catastrophic and apocalyptic perspective. And I think that's very important to promote as scientists. And very important to do the research with the Sustainable Development Goals 2030. I think that's also very clear and came up several times. The need for innovation, for entrepreneurship. We need to learn more about the mission innovation in COP21. Also the need to have a strong emphasis on evidence for public policy and collaborations with at the national and international levels, with NGOs, with the private sector, and I think multilateralism, and as you said, Claire, may be amplified to include many more actors. The strong role of science and education, from primary education all the way, really the learning process of young people is the most important thing as a legacy that we can do, and coupling that with sustainable development, the idea or the pilot study or the pilot project that the Italians just mentioned is really worth investigating in more detail. Involving citizens, there are several things that came up which were very interesting in terms of citizenship, both in terms of outreach, citizen science, and also climate action should also be viewed in the light of protecting people. Socially acceptable changes is a very important concept. And finally, we need to address also the differences between developed and developing countries. So that is just a very broad, very superficial maybe summary. I apologize if I left many things out, but it's just things out that I sort of could organize in this hour of meeting. To close, I just want to thank all the participants. I want to thank all the people that joined us, especially via the live streaming. And I want to also suggest that if you have recommendations or suggestions, the Chilean focal point, I'm sure you have an email, and you can let us know what your suggestions and recommendations are. We'll be happy to take them into account for future meetings. And just to give you a summary, we had today 18 participants from I think all continents, if I'm correct. Almost all continents. So we really hope in the next meeting to have all continents with us. 18 participants, I think, is a very good starting point for this meeting, which had the objective of bringing science to the COP. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
And it is finding that place. Yes, on this side.